Good evening, folks. Welcome to the Cool Season Flower Chronicles series. My name is Lisa Mason Ziegler, and I am the author of the book, Cool Flowers, which this series is actually based on. The series is brought to you by thegardenersworkshop.com, and we're just true believers that every flower lover that wants to grow flowers can grow flowers and even build businesses on flowers. So if you haven't seen my book, this is Cool Flowers. And if you don't already have a copy, you can pick it up anywhere books are sold, but I would love to sign a copy and personalize it to you if you'd like, and you can get that at thegardenersworkshop.com. Now, I also have, along with the book, a free video companion to go along with it. Now, if you purchase the book from us, you'll automatically get the link to those videos. There's a video for each and every chapter, and you'll automatically get that. Today is the final wrap up in this series, and I am going to revisit each week and just do some highlighting. So the first thing we reviewed was the cool flower concept, is what I call it, because it is just so hard for us to understand that even though these groups of plants are annuals, that they don't just survive cool to cold weather. They actually thrive. That's their secret sauce. That's their mantra. That's how they want to live and grow. And that is just so different than what we have kind of become accustomed to, because many of us, have only ever grown warm season tender annuals. Those would be things like zinnias, basil, tomatoes, all of those plants that we actually plant as soon as it gets warm, and they grow all through the summer season. Those are the most frequently, the most common annuals that we're aware of. And then when we hear cool season, hardy annual, and then you hear me say, yeah, many of them can be fall planted depending on where you live, what your winter hardiness zone is. Some can be even planted during the winter, again, based on where you live. And then all of them can be planted in what I refer to as very early spring, which is 6 to 8 weeks before your last spring frost. When it's for us here, I'm in southeastern Virginia. For us, that means our last spring frost is typically mid-April. So my very early spring planting window is typically Valentine's Day. That's such a great earmark for us. It's like, oh my gosh, Valentine's is in 2 weeks. We gotta, move on with what we're doing. So we typically, when we plant cool flowers in very early spring, oftentimes we are sweeping snow off of our beds, prepared the way that we've talked about in this series, or it is still very cold at night. Sometimes we might have sunny, warm days, but it's hard to grasp that these plants don't just like it, they actually love it. I mean, that's what they thrive in. I can distinctly remember the first year I ever planted stock. Stock is not featured in Cool Flowers. It's an after the book was published. We only plant it in the very early spring. We don't plant it in fall. It just grows too quickly. And the first year I planted stock, we actually pulled the covers off of our bed, the landscape fabric we had down, to get the snow off. There was about 6 inches of snow, and planted stock, and it was like such a great crop. But I laid in bed at night after we planted that crop thinking, they are never going to make it. This was such a bad idea. And so I totally get that you really have to kind of nail that note to the lining of your brain, that cool season hardy annuals don't just survive cool weather. They thrive in cool weather. So I gave homework the first week, And we had so many people that actually did the homework, and kudos to all of you guys, because I saw it all over social media, y'all talking about learning. What I sent you home to do was to find out from reliable sources. This is not guessing. This is, I really recommended that you connect with your local extension office and find out what your winter hardiness zone is, because they've changed, y'all. I mean, they're shifting with this weather business going on. So I've actually gone from 7B into 8A. So I file that away in my mind, you know. I keep that in mind because we get a little bit of action from both of those zones, meaning it still gets cold in the winter, but just not necessarily all the time. So your first piece of homework was to find out what your winter hardiness zone was. The second piece of information was to find out what your first fall expected frost is and your last spring expected frost is. Because y'all, the whole cool flower concept is based on that. It's based on planting at the proper time, because when you plant these cool season hardy annuals at the proper time, which means when it's cool to cold outside, so that these guys are either germinating and growing roots for the direct seeded stuff in cool conditions, or you're planting transplants that are then becoming established during that time. When these plants build their root system, not instead of a great thought process is when you plant a warm season tender annual, zinnia, celosia, sunflowers, all those guys in the spring, when you plant them, they immediately start growing roots and they start top growing. You know, the vegetation starts to grow and they start to get ready to develop buds. That's not what cool season flowers do. Cool season, when you plant them at the proper time, it's not time for them to grow vegetation and buds because it's cool to cold outside. So it allows them to build this amazing root foundation that's going to carry them through. For people like me that live in the South, we never even dreamed that we could plant these groups of flowers, right? But when we plant them at the proper timing and they get that excellent foundation, what I have found, they bloom so much longer into the heat and humidity of summer. We're still cutting snaps typically almost into July. That would be unheard of for spring planted snaps. Spring meaning when most people think you're supposed to plant them. And so the timing is crucial. I see posts about people talking about planting much later and how their plants did okay. And I just want to say your plants are going to be so much better than okay when you get this timing down. And the whole timing process is based on your winter hardiness zone, and when you're the timing is based on your first and last frost dates. And I want to read this to you. Your winter hardiness zone tells you what you can and cannot fall plant. I'm going to say that again. Knowing your winter hardiness zone only tells you what you can and cannot fall plant. Because in Cool Flowers, I provide for you, on like page 138, there's a sheet that lists all the cool flowers that are in the book. And it also tells you what winter hardiness zone they survive. So when you know your winter hardiness zone and then you see what the plant's hardiness zone is, if it's hardy in your zone, you should be fall planting that and it will survive your winter. Okay? So that's all that a winter hardiness zone is good, or knowing your winter hardiness zone is good for. It's your first and last frost dates that tell you when you can plant. Okay? Winter hardiness zones, whether you can fall plant. First and last frost dates, tells you when you can plant them. And I had a couple of questions that I kept hearing over and over, and I'm going to address them as I come to them in this review. And now I want to talk about succession planting. I got several questions about that. Is how do you succession plant cool flowers? So there is a way to succession plant cool flowers. If a plant is winter hardy in your winter hardiness zone, then you can fall plant, and then you can very early spring plant again. So some great examples that I do that with. I do that with Bupleurum. I do it with Sweet William. I do not any longer do it with Rudbeckias, thinking about Indian Summer, Prairie Sun, and Goldilocks. When I have done it, you can do it. But what I learned is that they both basically bloom at the same time. Their timing is totally day length sensitive related. And so I just got them to plant to bloom at the same time. However, huge difference in the abundance, how tall the stems were. Fall planted were almost twice as tall, twice as abundant, and much more disease and pest resistant. So you can do it. Sweet William is a great one. We only grow the Sweet William Amazon series, and we plant that in, and that's a super, I think they're actually hardy to zone 5. So a lot of people can succession plant these. Plant them in the fall, then we plant them again in very early spring, and they are fairly heat resistant. And that's part of one of their characteristics. So you can actually plant them, depending on what your customer base is and what you want in your garden blooming, you could plant Sweet William at the very early spring, 8 weeks out from your frost date, and then 2 weeks again and 2 weeks again. Because Sweet William, if you're selling to florists, they'll buy it every week you have it. It definitely starts to get a little shorter when the heat really heats up, but it's worth a try. So succession planting does not work like we do with warm season tender annuals. Those of us that live in winters that the ground doesn't freeze, which is actually us now, if you've prepared, as we talked about in this series, when you're supposed to in the fall, no matter when you're planting cool flowers, and you have space for it, that's another opening where you could plant some things over and over. I no longer actually plant many snaps at very early spring. I do plant some, but I find that they've become victims of rust, which is a big disease issue in snaps. For the spring planted, never had that happen to my fall planted. It's the difference between being well established with a great root system. So that's that. So that was week 2. So week 3, we learned about where are you going to plant cool flowers? How can you help them by giving them even more conditions that help them and aid them? Because the thing about growing in cool weather to cold weather and over winter, it's very different than summer growing. Because if you haven't overwintered annuals before, you may not know some of the problems that your garden has, because they really kind of flush themselves out in the wintertime. And the number one problem condition, and this is really, all of the cool flowers are susceptible, but the one that is the maddest when you do this is poor drainage for sweet peas. They will get disease and die in no time if they have any wet feet. So if you think about winter conditions in your mind, it rains, it snows, it ices more often. And then, in addition to that, it's not hot and warm outside. So the soil does not dry out, basically. Here for me in southeastern Virginia, once we try to get all of our cool season flower beds prepared, no later than mid-October. Because once those cool nights kind of start to happen, that wonderful for people, not so good for working garden soil, cool temperatures arrive. Once it rains, one really good time, our soil is wet for the entire winter. So you have got to beef up perhaps the drainage where you're going to plant cool flowers. Raised beds are definitely a must. And if you have suspicions about the drainage, I would make your beds even taller. I mean, a wonderful raised bed would be, 6 to 10 inches. And then obviously you're going to have to irrigate, but that means that the water is going to be getting away from your roots, and it will really revolutionize the survival rate and how well your plants actually survive. So the other couple other tools or tips, things that I do that I feel like really contribute to my huge success of overwintering cool flowers, particularly from the fall, is that we hoop and row cover all of our beds typically. And I'm going to talk about when you actually put those covers up here in just a moment. So I typically only grow the cool flowers I only fall plant the cool flowers that are winter hardy in my zone. So they technically do not need row cover. But row cover is about so much more than cold protection, y'all. We use lightweight road cover, and that is also in the links on that page, all of the links to all these supplies. Row cover, when you hoop and row cover and use weights in a way that really holds the row cover down and blocks the wind, you can't imagine how toasty it is to live under that row cover during winter. Because the row cover is hooped, it blocks the wind. Then in addition to that, on sunny days, it super concentrates the benefit of that heat. Then we also, for all of our transplants that are planted, which is about 2/3 of the cool flowers that we plant, we use the biodegradable film called Bio 360. It's black on one side and white on the other. We make our beds for cool flowers with the black side up. So then you add in addition to the hoops and that row cover concentrating the heat, then you have that black film on the soil. And so cool flowers just get this like little toasty beef ups every sunny day, and that helps them to build more roots. It just protects the foliage from being really beaten up and tattered. So that is a huge one. So I got the question, when do I put my row covers up? I do not put the row, and the row covers also protect from deer and pest damage, squirrels and rabbits, which is a big problem. The deer are huge for us in the winter, and the row cover keeps them from walking all over our beds and putting holes in it. I put the row covers up back in the days when it got cold at Thanksgiving and stayed cold all winter. I put them up, mid-November, soon after I planted, and left them up all winter. Now, because we have so much warmer times, typically they don't go up and stay up until we're below 32 degrees at night. That's kind of like my trigger. But if the days start going above 50 degrees, I will take them. I spend all winter taking my row covers up and down. But it definitely is worth it. So you just don't want to heat the plants too much to make them grow too big before spring gets here. That's what that's all about. So I've already mentioned that we use the biodegradable film. We do that because of that also really suppresses weeds in the transplanted beds. In the open beds where we direct sow, which we direct sow 1/3 of the crop that we grow, those seeds that prefer that, right? And I hoe every 10 to 14 days. There's a link to the hoe, and on the hoe page are a couple of videos of me hoeing crops, and you can see how quick and easy it is. And that is the real secret. Once I've done that 2 or 3 times before winter sets in, then we typically don't have to hoe through the winter, and you kind of exhaust the weed seed bank that's on the surface, because the whole point of our hoe, which was an Elliott Coleman design, is that you're only going 1/2 to 1 or 2 inches deep with your hoe, so you're not bringing up fresh weed seeds for them to germinate in the coming weeks, you are just skimming right below the surface to take out any developing weed seedlings and to not bring up fresh ones. So truly, y'all, you literally run out of weed seeds on the surface. I mean, it's kind of amazing, but it really, really works. So that is how we prevent weeds. So week 4, we talked about, so which way do you go? Do you direct seed or do you transplant? And I'm hoping the message that everybody got is that it's not really your personal choice of which way to go. You have to look and see what is the preferred method of that particular seed. And whenever both methods are listed, I typically list the method that I use first. And I will say that I've changed a method on one flower that's in Cool Flowers. Orlea, which is the white lace flower. In the book, it says that I start them inside. But in fact, I have found huge success in direct sowing them. So they are one that we now direct sow. The reason there's a choice between the two is which method is it the easiest to give that seed the conditions it needs to actually sprout. That's what it's based on. And me as a commercial farmer, we always prefer to start seeds indoors as transplants whenever we can. That is definitely the easiest, the less labor, the quickest, cheapest, for a whole lot of different reasons, way to start seeds instead of direct sowing. But there are some that just really need to be direct sown. I think I used larkspur as the example when we were talking about direct seeding. This is just an example of why you need to know, because you'll be a total failure perhaps if you don't follow the preferred method. Larkspur, to break dormancy and to sprout, to get that little seed to crack open and let that baby out of there, it needs a variation in temperature. Typically like 55-degree nights and 70-degree days, along with some moisture. So if you tried to start that seed in your home or in your greenhouse or wherever you start seeds, there is a really good chance that there is not that variation of temperatures. But if you plant larkspur in the fall, that's exactly what you give it. So if you started them inside, chances are good that the seed is just going to sit there and rot in the tray. Plant that same seed outside, and it's going to bang and germinate, right? So that's why so many of the emails and the struggles and the problems that people have are just operator error. And I know, because I've made all the errors, y'all. So take a step back. Read your seed packet, especially if they're from us. We put our directions on those. Read, review. I mean, literally, believe it or not, I wrote the book. And I take that book out to the garden with me when I'm planting cool flower seeds, direct seeding, because I can never remember, does that seed get covered with soil or does it need light and doesn't get covered? So take the book out to the garden with you. It's that important. It's the difference whether you succeed or not. So this week I want to tell you, because I think this is a surprise cool flower. I think most people don't realize it. Lisianthus is the highlight of this week. And I love Lisianthus. Everybody loves Lisianthus. Customers love it. I love it. And it is a cool flower. However, it does not bloom until the middle of summer. So a lot of people don't realize that it's a cool season hardy annual. We learned about this many years ago from a friend at the Cut Flower Association at one of the conferences. And she told me, she lived in Nebraska, and said that I could fall plant it for sure. She said there are actually hardy to zone 5, I believe, that what kills Lisianthus over the winter typically is wet feet. So we practiced fall planting of Lisianthus for many years when we were big growers. Now I only very early spring plant it, and it is strictly because We do not start Lisianthus from seed. I purchase plugs. Home gardeners can also purchase plants. They do have them available online. You just have to search for them, because starting them from seed is quite a struggle, and it's because they are so slow to grow. 12 to 16 weeks to get a plant that big, y'all. A lot of ways you can kill a transplant in 12 to 16 weeks. So we buy in plugs. And when we cut back our volume of growing, I didn't need that many Lizzies in the fall. So that's the only reason I stopped planting them then. So that's my highlight for this week is Lisianthus. Just to give a shout out that when we fall planted, so we are very early spring plant, we Valentine's Day plant Lisianthus. That's a big crop for us. And we get enormously tall stems growing out in the field, all because they have many weeks to really get well established before they start shooting up that top growth. So I just want to kind of give you a wrap up of, cool season hardy annuals are a group of plants that many people have skipped growing over the years, just like I used to. You just quite couldn't figure out when to plant them. And so I never had success with them. And so this series and the book, I hope, are going to just clear the fog so that you can totally embrace this group of flowers. Because I will tell you, as a farmer, the cash crop, this is a third of our production. Field grown, it's our production for April, May, and June. And it is such a perfect complement if you're growing perennials and woodies. You have just revved up your offering and your selection like nobody's tomorrow. And I'm talking field growing. You don't have to grow this in a hoop house. And if you're a home gardener, these are the plants that if your home is going to be on a spring garden tour, or if you just want your garden filled with amazing flowers in very early spring, bachelor buttons, calendula, and poppies are the very first flowers to bloom here and to bloom here on my farm. Typically the end of March, early April, and I mean, who doesn't want flowers at that time of the year, right? So it's just really, really amazing. And I didn't really mention this anywhere in this series. The other part of growing these flowers is when you grow cool flowers and cool season hardy annuals that are these early spring and then big spring bloomers into early summer, those early blooming flowers, particularly those three I just mentioned, bachelor buttons, poppies, and calendula, when you have those in your garden, y'all, you are like rolling out the red carpet to pollinators and beneficial insects. They are not only starving at that time of the year, because think about what's typically blooming that time of the year. Very little. Dandelions were a huge source for these guys, but of course we know what people do to dandelions nowadays, right? When you have these flowers available in your garden, the pollinators, and for me even as important, if not more important, beneficial insects are going to flock to your garden. And when you get them into your garden so much earlier than you normally would with your other crops without growing cool season hardy annuals, that means not only are they're in your garden setting up housekeeping before they were even in your garden in years past. That means they start having babies, they start patrolling your garden for they're predators of other bad bugs, right? So that is another, I think I really blame cool flowers actually for bringing all these great bugs into our garden and getting them in here early. My goal is to get these guys in our garden and to never allow them to leave, to always have flowers ready and available for them. I'm just reading my notes, y'all. And I'll say again that those of us that live in the South, below that center line of the Mason-Dixon line, some people call it, from Maryland across the United States, Many of us never even knew that we could grow bells of Ireland and sweet peas and snapdragons and poppies, because our summers are so long and hot and humid, and we can't grow them when you plant them in spring like most people traditionally do. When you follow the cool flower concept, which I did not make up, y'all. Our grandmas used to do this. I've just rekindled and brought it back and put it in the front seat, because for me as a flower farmer, this is a huge part of our business, because not only is the spring the highest demand for cut flowers, right? And then you're going to have a ton of cut flowers. And so that is just really, they'll become a really, really big part of your farm and your garden. So I just wanted to say again that this series was brought to you by thegardenersworkshop.com, and we believe that everybody that wants to grow flowers can. And we're here to help you do that. That the only fail with cool flowers is not planting them at all. So gang, if you're watching this live, there's a link at the top that takes you to the page that has all the resources of all the free stuff I have available for you, as well as links directly to the supplies. If you're watching this after the fact on my blog page, all of those links and all the previous videos are below. I am so glad you decided to join me here. So this is Lisa Mason Ziegler signing off. Ciao.